And that follows an extended 9 o'clock news now on BBC One with Peter Sissons.
The 17-month ceasefire is over, according to a statement tonight claiming to be from the IRA. Within minutes, a massive explosion hit an area of London's Docklands. More than 100 people have been hurt. The statement said blame for the failure of the Irish peace process lies squarely with the British government. The Prime Minister, John Major, said the explosion was an appalling outrage and urged IRA Sinn Féin to condemn it. A massive explosion tonight shook the London Docklands shortly after a statement claiming to be from the IRA said the Northern Ireland ceasefire was over. At least 4 people have been seriously injured and 100 are described as walking wounded. The Prime Minister described the explosion as an atrocity. In a statement he said, "This is an appalling outrage. My first thoughts are with the casualties, their families and the emergency services. We will pursue relentlessly those responsible for this disgraceful attack." Tony Blair called it a sickening outrage. It's believed the bomb was in an underground garage beneath a 6-storey building at South Quay in the London Docklands. Tonight, security measures are being put back in force across the capital. The IRA statement, delivered to a Dublin TV station using a recognised code, said that nationalist Ireland had risen to the challenge of the ceasefire, but went on, "Time and again, over the past 18 months, selfish party political and sectional interests in the London Parliament have been placed before the rights of the people of Ireland. Blame for the failure of the Irish peace process lies squarely with John Major and his government." Soon after the statement, the East End Canary Wharf area was shaken by a massive explosion.
The alarm went out just an hour after the alleged end to the ceasefire. A bomb had rocked the Canary Wharf area of London. Buildings shook, 2 partly collapsed, shattered windows sent out showers of glass. The injured were ferried to hospital in a fleet of ambulances. The police had received a coded warning an hour earlier. The Docklands South Quay railway station had already been evacuated. But the police say there are 100 walking wounded, with 2 or 3 more seriously hurt. A 5-year-old girl had facial injuries. Eyewitnesses gave their accounts of what happened.
There was this almighty bang, a couple of windows went in, a few of the beams from the roof fell down, and last time I remember I was underneath the table.
Anyone hurt?
No one hurt.
No one hurt?
No. A few people upset, but no one hurt.
Do you know where the bomb was within the building? Or?
No, I was coming out of the gents, and as I was walking back to where Peter was sitting, the glass just started flying. I had to fall under the tables. We were in a pub which is underneath the station, and then when we were let out, there was damage at the roof of the bar,
the atrium at the bar,
and the building as we were coming out. So I thought all the bombings were over, you know. And one thing that really surprised me, some guy in uniform, I don't know whether it was a policeman or from the fire brigade, he mentioned the IRA.
Yeah.
He'd be banged, and just literally the shelves and radiators and that just fell off the walls. Everything was just falling down, you know, people screaming and that. And it was over in seconds, so we just made sure everyone was calm and just cleared the building and went off to...
I just phoned someone up in Limehouse, and they felt it 2-3 miles away.
Was anybody hurt?
I think so.
There's a couple of people that got cuts and bruises, a couple of ambulances.
But that's this way. It's probably further up. It's probably worse.
Yeah, it's probably worse. It's actually the station itself. The pub is right, literally underneath the station, more or less.
The police say the explosion did involve some kind of device. Firemen have been investigating reports that some people could have been trapped in the basement of a building. But this is an experience shocked Londoners had got used to, hoping they wouldn't have to go through again. Valerie Jones, BBC News.
And we've just received eyewitness accounts of the explosion from people who were in their offices at the time of the blast.
The whole of the building shook with massive vibration. All the ceiling tiles fell down, and shelves flew off the wall, and some of the windows got blown out. And there was dust and debris everywhere. I looked out of the window out of the 5th floor, only to see that there's been a bomb directly outside that's blown out the whole of the front of our building.
We thought a bomb had gone off inside our building. The whole building shook. The windows looked like they buckled. They physically came in about 6 inches. Debris fell from the roof, just screams. Everybody just ran out and said, let's everybody get out.
And our correspondent John Devitt is as near as he can get to tonight's explosion. John, what do you know? What more do you know?
Well, a lot of people are walking around dazed. Those people who were near to the explosion that you've heard there in the earlier reports, many of them wondering what has happened to people they knew who were nearby at the time of the explosion. The police have been progressively sealing off a wider and wider area around and moving people away. I think there is some fear that there might be a secondary device, but it's probably just a precaution at the moment.
And what do you know about the device that actually exploded?
It's very difficult to say. Obviously, it caused quite a substantial explosion. At one moment, they thought it might have been a gas explosion. That seems to be unlikely now. It did fracture a gas mains within this building. Part of it has collapsed. It wasn't actually where the South Quay railway station is. That was closed off about an hour before the explosion, after the police had received some tip-offs from sources in Northern Ireland to say that there might be a device in the station.
And just looking around you, John, what is the extent of the damage?
It's difficult to see the site of the damage, but as I say, a couple of buildings seem to have been partially collapsed. It seems to have been in an underground car park that may have withheld some of the blast, and we'll have to wait and see really the extent of the damage when we can get a little closer.
And the amount of activity in the area now?
Well, just around me now, the police are closing off this very main road that goes straight past here, and this is a little way away from the site of where the bomb went off, so I don't know quite the reason for that. Certainly in the next hour or so, we're expecting the head of the anti-terrorist branch to give us some more details about what's happened and what they plan to do.
John, thank you very much indeed. Many of the casualties were taken to the Royal London Hospital nearby. Our correspondent Joe Paley is there. Joe, what is the news from the hospital?
Well, scores of people have been coming into the hospital this evening. We think that there may be up to 50 people here, many of them coming in with cuts, lacerations to the face. 2 of the patients here are seriously injured. There's one man who has serious head and chest injuries, and he's just gone into surgery. Also, the hospital has sent one of the 3 medical teams down to the site, but because of the question of security, of the possibility of a second bomb, which John Devitt was talking about, they can't for the moment get into it.
Do you get the impression that there was an emergency procedure ready to swing into operation?
I think so, and many of the doctors and nurses who came here had simply been brought in on the pager, and they were given a folder of instructions exactly what to do, and the hospital, I must say, does seem to be working very efficiently.
Joe Paley, thank you very much indeed. In the last few minutes, Gerry Adams has issued a statement. He said, "My response to tonight's news is one of sadness. I regret that an unprecedented opportunity for peace has foundered on the refusal of the British government and the unionist leaders to enter into dialogue and substantive negotiations. I appeal for calm. Sinn Féin's peace strategy," went on Mr. Adams, "remains as the main function of our party. It is my personal priority," he says. "All those who made genuine efforts to build the peace process must keep their nerve in the face of predictable and hypocritical reaction from political representatives who've done nothing to encourage the risky search for a peaceful settlement. That search," went on Mr. Adams, "must be redoubled." Well, in Dublin, the Irish Prime Minister John Bruton said the bombing in London was entirely unjustified. Ken McGuinness of the Ulster Unionists said the hopes of thousands of people had been dashed by what had happened. Well, we hope to have a report from Northern Ireland very soon. But in the meantime, the Prime Minister gave his first reaction to the explosion in a written statement in which he called on Sinn Féin to condemn immediately and unequivocally those who planted the bomb. Opposition leaders were also quick to condemn the action. Politicians from all parties are suggesting the return to violence might be blamed on splits between factions within the IRA. The scaling down of security arrangements, both in the province and on the mainland, became a symbol of the ceasefire. Our Home Affairs correspondent Jane Peel looks at the task facing the security forces in the wake of today's events.
Security has been slowly scaled down since the start of the ceasefire. In March last year, the army began a phased withdrawal from Northern Ireland. They'd already replaced hard helmets with berets and removed body armour. Everywhere there began to be signs of a relaxation of controls. In Britain too, things changed. After the bomb attacks on the Baltic Exchange and Bishopsgate in the City of London, 1,500 litter bins were removed to get rid of easy hiding places. They've now returned. But the so-called Ring of Steel has remained in place, a series of road closures and vehicle checks designed to discourage the IRA. They were kept largely because the measures significantly reduced traffic. The police and the security service have done nothing to scale down their anti-terrorist work despite the ceasefire. There's always been the possibility, if not the expectation, that violence would resume. Sources at MI5 say surveillance and intelligence gathering has continued because IRA members and supporters have spent the past 17 months going about all their usual business, with the exception of planting bombs. In Northern Ireland, although some troops have moved out, they can be recalled at short notice. There'll be some relief that there was no swift and overwhelming response to the ceasefire, which might have proved irreversible. Jane Peel, BBC News.
At Westminster, the reaction of the leaders of all the main parties has been one of contempt and outrage. Paddy Ashdown said it was a grave piece of news. The IRA, he said, were acting contrary to the established will of the people on both sides of the Irish border. From Westminster, Anne Perkins.
From early evening, Westminster was awash with rumours that the ceasefire was about to end. Moments after 7, the bomb went off. The Shadow Northern Ireland Secretary, Mo Moulam, heard the blast.
Yes, I heard it, as I'm sure a lot of people in London did. And throughout Britain and Northern Ireland, the reaction, I'm sure, will be the same. One of sadness at what is a tragedy for the peace process. A process that has been affected by this enormous bomb tonight that we in the Labour Party condemn completely.
And what do you make of this statement from the IRA announcing the end of the ceasefire?
I think what's important tonight is to focus on the victims' families, those people that have been injured, and then we must all keep searching for peace in the weeks and months ahead.
The Conservative Party chairman was kept in touch with developments as he prepared to give a speech to a party event in London. He was unwilling to comment directly on tonight's news.
Peace in Northern Ireland is important to everyone, and under the Prime Minister's leadership, we have been devoting great efforts with others, not only to getting the peace established, but seeking to maintain it and to develop it. That is common ground across the floor of the House of Commons.
So therefore this is a worrying, potentially, development?
Well, when I have further information, I might then be in a position better to comment on perfectly legitimate questions, but I'm just not able at the moment to respond to them.
The Liberal Democrats leader, who brought two of the central protagonists in Northern Ireland together to his party conference last autumn, spoke tonight of the shattering of tremendous hopes.
I'm bound to say that I think this is a move which will be very damaging for the IRA itself and may even cause their division. But in the short term, the shattering of the peace that is so precious and has been built with so much blood and so much effort and so much patience and so much commitment is, I think, something which most people will greet with a sinking heart and a sense of absolute horror.
Other MPs, like the former Northern Ireland Minister Michael Mates, who's still kept up to date on developments in Ulster, agree.
It confirms what many of us feared, and that is that it was only part of Sinn Féin and IRA who was interested in trying to reach a political settlement, and that there was a section of them who were not interested in trying to go down the democratic road.
And the Prime Minister, who's in his constituency, faxed a statement within the past hour calling on Sinn Féin to condemn those who planted the bomb and renewing his call for decommissioning.
The news of the Dublin statement by the IRA and the London bombing took Northern Ireland by surprise, and there was shock among most political parties there. From Northern Ireland, Dennis Murray reports.
Tonight, Sinn Féin headquarters on the Andersonstown Road in West Belfast was dark and quiet. Sources at the very highest level in the political leadership of the Republican movement, to many the political wing of the IRA, knew nothing about the statement. They couldn't say it was true, they couldn't deny it. On a BBC Northern Ireland programme recorded before the news broke, one of those Sinn Féin leaders underlined their lack of prior knowledge. Republicans, he said, were still committed to the peace process.
I can give an unequivocal assertion that Sinn Féin is committed to the total demilitarisation of our community, the total demilitarisation. That means IRA weapons, including all the other weapons.
But the language of tonight's statement is entirely credible, in line with that used even at the time of the IRA's ceasefire. The code word that went with it, used several times recently in authentic IRA statements. Representatives of the Unionist Protestant community were aghast.
If there has been a resumption of violence, then I would have to say that it's clearly been done in order to try to prevent elections. And it is incredible that people who for the last 18 months have been telling us that they want to move into the democratic process should be resorting to violence in order to stop democratic elections.
A terrorist is a terrorist until he gives up his terrorist weapons. And none of them will give up their weapons. None of them will give up their campaign for murder. They intend to murder.
We prayed that we would never go back into this nightmare. So much work has been done in the public gaze and behind the scenes to try and build this peace and to build it stronger. The people of Northern Ireland do not want this. The people of Britain must realise this is not the will of the people of Northern Ireland.